Salut. Je suis un fusilier de la Grande Armée, oui, Napoleon Bonaparte, l'empereur. Je ne comprends pas. Non. Hello, future. So, I present to you the Napoleonic Wars today. How exciting, huh? So, let's, dig right in. Let's time travel all the way back to the early 19th century. Ladies and gentlemen, people of the future, I present to you a French Fusilier from the year 1812. So, before I explain the outfit, I first want to tell you a brief history of the Napoleonic Wars. And then after that, I've got a few little surprises for you, as well as food from the time, explaining the attire from head to toe in detail, and also explaining the arms and weapons of the time. So stay tuned, there's a lot of exciting things coming up. As usual in my reenactment series, I first explain the history though. The Napoleonic Wars. Why did they happen? Why did a series of wars happen and that spanned 20 years? Why did they happen? In order to understand them, we need to go back to the beginning of time, to the protoplanetary disk, when the sun was still new and the dust around it was collecting into the planets that we know about. Sorry, monsieur, is that a little bit too far back? All right, no problem. We will begin a little bit earlier. Okay, fine. Yeah, we'd be here all day. So the best way to understand is we need to go back to the French Revolution. So the French Revolution, in a nutshell, was basically a complete turnaround in French society. For centuries, France had been ruled by the king. This was basically the Middle Ages. And so, of course, the king dictated his kingdom and the people answered to the king. In France, come the 18th century, and France was divided into the three estates. So the first estate was the king, of course, and the nobility. The second estate was basically one level down from that, so basically the clergy, basically the middle class. And right at the bottom, the third estate was, you guessed it, the peasants, like me, Gérard, oui, terrible. Terrible. So that was the way that things were in France. And eventually, come 1789, and the people had literally drawn the last straw. The people were fed up with King Louis XVI, who basically had just recently taxed the people to help pay for the 7 Years' War and the American Revolution, for supporting the Americans against the British. Oh, it was a disaster. So the people of France were fed up. And in July 1789, the people eventually took up whatever weapons they had, their pitchforks, their skewers, anything that they had, and they stormed the Bastille. The Bastille is basically the symbol of King Louis's tyranny. It was basically a fort overlooking Paris. So the people stormed the Bastille. Now, why this is so important is it wasn't just the people taking a fort, it was also very symbolic. It gave the revolution a foothold that it needed to keep on going. And also the Bastille was filled with gunpowder and arms that the people seized. And well, now the people are armed and ready. And what ended up happening after that was they went and ended up storming Versailles and capturing King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette. So after that, basically things were not as simple as you may think they were. The people didn't know if they should kill him or if they should keep him alive as a puppet, so they were sort of debating with themselves. King Louis only lost his head 3 years later in 1792 to the guillotine. And I'm looking at this bell tower here. It looks very, very much like we are in Spain, in the 1800s. but it does look a bit like a guillotine, doesn't it? So the guillotine was a big blade invented to chop off the enemies of the revolution. So eventually, yes, they decided that it was about time to chop off King Louis's head. And basically things were actually, you know, a new a French Republic was declared, Constitution was proclaimed, the rights of man were written down, the tennis court oath was sworn right near the beginning. So things looked all right. The king was now executed, so it looked like the revolution had achieved its aim to get rid of the aristocracy and let the people rule. But eventually a certain man named Maximilien Robespierre, he was essentially the de facto ruler of the new French Republic. He had risen up so high, and eventually he started to become very superstitious, and he ended up chopping off heads left, right, and center. It was a disaster. Long story short, eventually he got his own head chopped off. Yeah, so basically the French Revolution was chaos. And this is now where Napoleon comes in. So Napoleon was born in 1769 to a fairly noble family in Corsica. Corsica is an island closer to Italy than it is to France in the Mediterranean Ocean. But Corsicans viewed themselves as Corsicans very proudly, and France had been trying to annex Corsica for a while. So by the time Napoleon was born, he, in his own diaries later, Napoleon described how he was born into a divided world. And he had quite a tumultuous early life. His father was a patriot, but he actually his father actually ended up collaborating with the French, which Napoleon hated. It's alleged that Napoleon loved his mother very dearly, but did not like his father at all. And I find it fascinating that there's a parallel with Adolf Hitler, in that also he loved his mother but hated his father. So it's interesting to study the psychology of these great people. Every person is just a human, but nonetheless, Napoleon, you need to understand Napoleon to understand the Napoleonic Wars. I mean, they were named after him, for crying out loud. So anyway, Napoleon was a Corsican at heart. But eventually, Corsica being annexed by France, his father wanted a good future for him. He wanted Napoleon to have a good future with the aristocracy of France. So he sent him to a military school to learn, and Napoleon hated it. Napoleon basically was taken from a Mediterranean paradise into the cold, cloudy northern France, into Paris. And Napoleon was very miserable. He was a 9-year-old when he was sent there. So Napoleon grew and grew and was, according to... wait for the future machine. Strange, very weird future machines. Where was I? Oh yes, Napoleon's. Legend goes that Napoleon was a very isolated individual. He kept to himself most of the time. He was very antisocial, but he was already showing signs of his military brilliance at the school, and he was apparently really like a top academic. But he was apparently bullied by the other French boys for being Corsican. Even when he arrived, he barely knew French, and apparently he spoke French with a very Corsican accent. So it is something like this. I don't know if they talk like Italians there in Corsica. I don't know. But yeah, Napoleon had quite a rough upbringing. But nonetheless, eventually his father... Eventually he really had grown to really dislike his father. Opulence. He hated opulence. And Napoleon apparently even went back to Corsica and helped some rebels fighting the French. So isn't it so ironic how Napoleon would rule France, the nation that he hated, one day? But I really do swear, this is one of my sayings from a little while back, is that opposites are similar. And it shows how history seesaws like this. Anyway, eventually Napoleon tried to come in with favor with the rebels, the Corsican rebels, but apparently they viewed him as just being some dreamer, inexperienced dreamer, and this really upset Napoleon, and eventually he was actually outlawed in Corsica, so he had no choice but to go back and live in France. So Napoleon was quite heartbroken by this, but nonetheless he now started to realize that, well, sometimes you just got to choose the victor. And Napoleon now started to become more and more French, which is important. So eventually Napoleon was allegedly even suicidal. He really just was miserable in France. But just as that happened, well, boom, the French Revolution began in 1789, and this was what Napoleon needed to give him the impetus. So Napoleon, of course, was a very ordered man. The French Revolution was chaotic. So, of course, when the chaos of the revolution, Robespierre, the reign of terror, chaos everywhere, Napoleon seized the opportunity. And in 1793, when just after King Louis and Marie Antoinette were beheaded, the British were sending in their ships to southern France to try and stop the revolution. Remember, foreign nations were trying to invade France for one reason: to stop the revolution. Because remember, most of France's neighbors were monarchies, and they were worried that having a neighboring nation chopping off their king and queen's head, these ideas might spread to their people, very much like the Cold War with the fear of communism. So this was the state of things, and the British sent in their navy to the port of Toulon. Now Napoleon had an opportunity, being captain of artillery at the time. He was sent in to try and help stop the British. So he realized that he needed to station the guns on the heights, and if he was to open fire on the ships in the port, they would have no choice but to retreat, and he would save Toulon. So many of his contemporaries were quite hesitant at this, dismissing him. But one such man actually did agree, and the plan was put forward and executed, and this was Napoleon's first major victory. And I argue this was the beginning of the Napoleonic Wars. So what are the Revolutionary Wars, and where does it blur into the Napoleonic Wars? They're pretty much hand in hand. However, Toulon was, I argue, the first Napoleonic battle, because it involved Napoleon having command. But it was also a revolutionary battle. So, I mean, you could even argue Waterloo was a revolutionary war against monarchist powers such as Britain and Prussia. But that's a little bit story for another day. Anyway, Napoleon had his first victory. However, after that, he was promoted. It was looking great, like he was climbing up. However, he reached a dead end, and he needed someone to notice him, and he didn't have that opportunity until 1795, when there was a rebellion. Some aristocrats, say it with me, vive la révolution. Anyway, these aristocrats wanted to restore the monarchy. So Napoleon was now had his opportunity. He was sent in to go and stop the rebellion. So he stationed his cannons, and for pretty much the first time in Paris's history did they open fire on civilians with their cannons. And it was a massacre. But Napoleon was said to have been very pleased with the order and how he had succeeded. And he was noticed and promoted to general. He was now a General Bonaparte. Oh, by the way, he changed his name from Napoleon Bonaparte to Napoleon Bonaparte, to Frenchianize it. It was around this time that he met the love of his life, Josephine. Josephine was quite a noble lady, but she fell into hard times, and Napoleon saw an opportunity to try help this lady. But also they say, yeah, he was genuinely in love with her. He was about 26 at the time, and Josephine was about 30 something, 31, 32, 33 at the time that they met. And here was Josephine needing a hero to help save her, and here was General Bonaparte. So of course it was a no-brainer almost. So yeah, and why Josephine is so important. Oh, we have some loud future people. Nice future people. They're like, oh, there's a Frenchman over there. And I was like, oui, bonjour. So yeah. Yeah, anyway, so why Josephine is so important is because it is said that Napoleon never stopped loving her to the day that he died. And Josephine influenced the Napoleonic Wars as a whole. So quite important, I think. I mean, history would have played out so differently if Josephine never existed. So yeah, another important person in history. So anyway, Napoleon, being general, was now given command of Italy, the French forces in Italy. And he went on a campaign to try and stop the royalists from killing the revolution. And he was actually very successful. There was even a bridge that he took, and he just assaulted it head on and did it. So yeah. Napoleon really was proving himself and was climbing at such a fast rate, So many people, of course, were alarmed at this, but no one could stop Bonaparte. So eventually then, Bonaparte set his sights onto Egypt because he knew that whoever controlled Egypt controlled trade with the East, with the Suez Canal, and also the British Empire was was trying to control Egypt, but also the Ottomans had power in Egypt too. So it was quite a mess. But Napoleon went into Egypt. However, it is said that Napoleon was cut off from retreat, so had no choice but to go, because the British, being the naval power that we are, we stopped those Frenchies right in the pond, I say. Jolly lovely. Yeah. So Napoleon abandoned his campaign in Egypt, but there was a time when French soldiers, a little bit different, the Shaker wasn't around, so they were wearing the bicorn hats, were marching in Egypt. And also, just on a side note, that is also what led to the revival of ancient Egypt. It was thanks to Bonaparte. Egypt was known, even in the 1600s, people knew that there was a sphinx there, like some explorer had seen it, some English explorer. But it was a big mystery. No one knew about the pharaohs and Ra and Thoth and all of them. But eventually, with the French arriving, Bonaparte had even arrived with archaeologists and people to study France, not just soldiers. And they started to uncover and document ancient Egypt. So thanks to that, we know about ancient Egypt today. And then, of course, the Victorian revival that saw it en masse with the British. But anyway, it was thanks to the French that started it. So Napoleon now was climbing on his way, and eventually in 1804 he was crowned Emperor of France. And the story goes that it was a cold winter's day in December, and he walked up to the crown. It was a great ceremony, and he took it with his own hands and placed the crown on his own head. He is stated to have said that he found the French crown in the gutter and picked it up with his own hands, placed it on his head. So Bonaparte was now literally one of the most powerful men in Europe. Remember, France was a superpower even in the 17th century. France was the America of the 21st century. It was the Britain of the 19th century. France was the superpower. So the 1700s, France was pretty much a superpower that was a force to be reckoned with. So Napoleon tapped into that, and he became Emperor of France. Then fast forward to 1806, and he wins his greatest victory at Austerlitz. Remember, he's back in Austria, trying to subdue the Austrians. Always the Austrians are giving him problems. That's why he ended up marrying an Austrian princess to try and stop that. But Austerlitz saw him essentially win a great victory where he literally countercharged the Austrians from behind and shot the frozen lake with his cannons, sending them all to a watery grave. It was one of his most concise and greatest victories. And soon after, also at the Battle of Jena, where he stopped the Prussians. Basically, Napoleon now was literally dissolving and creating nations at will. He literally dissolved the Holy Roman Empire in 1806. And out of it created the Confederation of the Rhine. Napoleon had ended 1,000 years of the Holy Roman Empire since the time of Charlemagne in the year 800. Can you believe it, hey? So yeah, that's just how influential Napoleon was now. And the Battle of Friedland comes along, the Battle of Marengo a bit earlier on, was basically just victory after victory after victory. It looked like Napoleon was unstoppable. Eventually, Napoleon wanted to also invade Britain. However, he assembled a great big army in northern France to invade Britain, but it never came to fruition. The great paradigm between the whale and the elephant, the French and the British, neither able to challenge each other in their own domains, the sea and land. So Napoleon had to abandon his invasion of Britain, but it was at that time that he named his army La Grande Armée, the great army, the grand army. And if you look at the uniform, you can see why. So Napoleon eventually, that's where he then went down and to Austerlitz, etc. So yeah, with him being at the height of his power, he eventually negotiated a deal with Russia to try and blockade Britain in the continental system. Where was I? Oh yes. So Napoleon now made a deal with Tsar Alexander. He was the Emperor of Russia, to try and unite the whole of continental Europe against Britain to create the continental system. Essentially a blockade where none of them was allowed to trade. None of them were allowed to trade with Great Britain. As to whether this system succeeded or not, pretty much it failed. Firstly, it crippled Russia, Napoleon's ally, which turned Russia against France later. And Britain was fine. Britain managed to get sources from elsewhere, from its colonies. It was at Tilsit where Napoleon brokered a great deal with the Russian emperor and allegedly became great friends with him. There's even a famous picture of them kissing each other to seal the deal. So yeah, Napoleon even said if Alexander was a woman, he would make him his mistress. So yeah, it looked like it was a great alliance, even though they had just been enemies. So anyway, so now that Napoleon had pretty much no enemies except Britain, but they were pretty much at bay, Napoleon now set his sights to Spain. And this is where my outfit comes in, because my impression goes to 1812 in Spain. So why Spain is so important in the Napoleonic Wars is Spain was essentially Napoleon's Vietnam. It was a war that he dragged himself into, and it only cost him hundreds and hundreds of soldiers every single day. So what happened was in 1808 he invaded, but eventually in May, the people of Spain got so angry with him that they revolted, and thousands of Spanish people were killed and executed. Why did he invade Spain? Napoleon viewed Spain as being backwards, as being very outdated and very superstitious. He saw that Spain was governed and by a lot of people who were very religious but were illiterate. So Napoleon viewed that his French army was a remedy to Spain's backwardness. So he invaded Spain and tried to, he viewed himself as a liberator. He expected no resistance, but resistance there was. And did you know that the word guerrilla warfare comes from this time, guerrilla, which is Spanish for little war? The Spanish people initiated a little war against the French soldiers, hiding in ambush, waiting in the cliffside, firing upon them, and this war became such a brutal war that people were literally fearful of being captured. French soldiers were literally mutilated by French civilians, cut off, mutilated, chopped off, legs chopped off, even their genitals were removed and stripped naked and impaled and left and nailed to doors upside down. It's gruesome. But the French eventually, in response to the brutality, did the same thing to the Spanish people. And there's a famous quote that goes that Spain, a general's fortune, an officer's ruin, a soldier's death. Barracks graffiti written by a common soldier. Isn't that fascinating, hey? It was viewed that to go to Spain was a death sentence, and many hated the idea. So my impression, yes. The British called it the Peninsular War. So if you've heard of the Peninsular War, it's the same thing. So my impression is the Peninsular War. I'll explain my outfit after the history. But first, how did Napoleon end? Now we are reaching the downfall. So 1812, so literally 5 years in Spain, slowly drained the empire just day by day. Come 1812, and Tsar Alexander has betrayed Napoleon in the continental system. He is secretly trading with Britain. So Napoleon now is furious. He literally assembles the biggest army in human history up until that point. Let me say it again. The biggest army in human history. 600,000 men. This is just over 500,000 soldiers. So only in World War I did the German army supersede this figure. Not even the Romans, not the Carthaginians, not ancient Greece, not Alexander, not the Holy Roman Empire, not the Byzantine Empire. No one had made a bigger army than Napoleon, his Grande Armée in 1812. So Napoleon invaded Russia with this great army in summer, and what is crazy is so many soldiers deserted, died of exhaustion, starvation. Even though Napoleon said an army marches on its stomach, it still couldn't detract from 19th century logistics always have flaws. 150,000 soldiers had deserted or died or just vanished. So yeah, Napoleon's army, before even having a battle in Russia, was already reduced. Now, the Russians were purposefully avoiding Napoleon, knowing how good a general he was. But eventually, they turned around and faced him at Borodino. Borodino was the city just before Moscow. So if they take Borodino, the French are literally on the doorstep of Moscow. So the Russians knew that we cannot let Bonaparte take Borodino. We have to hold it at all costs. Da! And they did their best, and it was a huge behemoth battle, one of the biggest battles in human history, save for the Somme and Stalingrad later on. But Napoleon won, but only just by a little bit. He had lost literally tens of thousands of soldiers at Borodino, and so did the Russians. And General Kutuzov kept on retreating again and again, the Russian general. And eventually Napoleon entered Moscow completely unopposed. Moscow was literally deserted. Now, however, this was the genius of Tsar Alexander. He knew that he mustn't play Bonaparte's game, else he will lose. If anyone plays Napoleon's game, they will lose. That's just how great Napoleon was at playing his game. So Alexander played his own game. When Napoleon was in Moscow, wondering where the heck Tsar Alexander was and trying to write to him and say, please, let's negotiate, Alexander replied with silence. He simply ignored Napoleon. He didn't play his game. So now Napoleon was in a really bad predicament. Should he stay in Moscow but then literally die of starvation with the army because they had completely burnt and scorched the city? Moscow was literally engulfed in flames. Arsonists were rounded up and shot, and or literally go deeper into Russia to try find the Russian army, which was a death sentence, or go all the way back to France, or potentially take winter quarters in Poland, but this was a bit impractical. And eventually Napoleon, after 5 weeks of waiting and waiting, had no choice but to fall the army back to retreat. With no response from Tsar Alexander, no treaty to be brokered, they were still in a state of war. And as Napoleon retreated his army, about 3 weeks later, the snow started and temperatures dropped up to minus 20 degrees and early winter had set in. And Napoleon's army, bit by bit, started to freeze and starve and die. And harassed by the back were the Cossacks, the famous Russian soldiers on horseback, were attacking the army from all sides, chipping away slowly and making it less and less and less. Come 1813, and out of the 600,000 soldiers that departed for Russia, only about 40,000 had returned. It was Napoleon's greatest blunder, his huge disaster. And same year, 1813, Napoleon, also Wellington had taken Spain, was right on the doorstep of southern France. The war in Spain just came to nothing. So I argue that Spain and Russia was Napoleon's death sentence. This was the beginning of the end. So eventually in 1813, Napoleon was pursued by a new coalition, the Sixth Coalition. There were literally seven coalitions founded to try and stop Bonaparte, each one failing until the Sixth Coalition. So Russia, Britain, Prussia. Austria was a bit hesitant because Bonaparte had married, sadly, Josephine. He had to divorce Josephine because she didn't bear him a child. So Napoleon eventually married an Austrian princess to bear an heir, which he did. Napoleon Jr. Anyway, so the Austrians were a little bit, they were like, we won't take sides. And a huge battle was fought at Leipzig in Germany, where it was known as Battle of the Nations. All these nations trying to stop Bonaparte. What is so crazy is the coalition had now learned. They learned that whenever they face Napoleon head on, they probably will lose. So they came up with a genius new strategy, is to avoid Napoleon and only battle with his generals. So what the coalition armies would do, the allied armies, is they would leave Napoleon where they know he's coming and head for his generals and attack his generals and defeat them. And if Napoleon's coming to them, they then retreat. Napoleon could not play this game. He was furious. And this essentially meant that the coalition was able to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. Eventually, they had surrounded France. Napoleon was in Fontainebleau at the time, where eventually it was decided that he had no choice but to abdicate. Napoleon abdicated the throne. So now what next? Well, it looked like peace was finally achieved after nearly 20 years of war in Europe. Imagine being in that generation. 20 years of war is all you know. Peace is now finally here. Napoleon is exiled to an island called Elba in the Mediterranean Ocean, never to be seen again. Given an honorable exile with about 1,000 soldiers to escort him, and a pretty decent life in Elba. But after about 100 days, Napoleon broke free and returned. Napoleon returned. L'Empereur is here. Vive la France! The French king, the aristocracy, say with me, the French king was ordered Marshal Ney to capture Napoleon, one of Napoleon's greatest field marshals. And when Ney arrived with his troops aiming at Bonaparte, Bonaparte stood in front of the troops, telling his soldiers to stand down, and he said, "If you wish to shoot your emperor, here I am, fire away." And he was met with shouts of "Vive l'Empereur! Long live the emperor!" And Napoleon eventually made his way back into power, and the coalition was horrified, so they founded the Seventh Coalition to try stop Bonaparte. And eventually it was decided that the British should be knocked out once and for all in Belgium, because Wellington's army was stationed in Belgium, and even Blücher's Prussian army was also in Belgium. So Napoleon decided to strike Blücher first while they separated, and at the Battle of Ligny, this was literally Bonaparte's final victory. From Toulon right up until Ligny, that was his final victory. And then eventually the French caught up with the British at a small little village called Waterloo in Belgium. On the early morning had been raining that Napoleon had to postpone the attack, which brought Blücher, who had escaped the jaws of death at Ligny, to give him time to rejoin with Wellington. Napoleon, though, was confident that he could knock out Wellington before that happened. But the battle took much longer than expected. The French tried to take the British position, just couldn't. There was a farmhouse at Waterloo. The British had taken it, then the French had taken it, then the British had taken it, then the French. It just swapped hands fruitlessly. And eventually, come the evening, and Blücher is now spotted on the horizon. Bonaparte, in his horror, realizes that he has lost the battle. Blücher has come in and joined in the flank of Wellington to deal the knockout blow to Napoleon's final Imperial Guard, the old guard he had committed, his final desperate last gamble reserve, who were about to break Wellington's position, and also the cuirassiers trying to get around Wellington, but he formed the blocks to stop the cavalry with bayonets. Waterloo was lost by the French. Napoleon eventually was forced to abdicate again, but this time was exiled to St. Helena, all the way off the coast of southern Africa. In fact, it was pretty much in the middle of the ocean, in the Atlantic. And Napoleon stayed there for another 6 years until his death in 1821. And that, ladies and gentlemen, well, was the Napoleonic Wars. Forgive me if I've missed anything. I did my best. So now it's time to look at the attire, and I shall explain it. And afterwards we'll do some food and a little surprise. All right, let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the equipment of a French Fusilier or Musketeer in 1812, which I shall now explain to you. The equipment of a Fusilier in La Grande Armée in 1812 is as follows. So starting from the bottom, I wear leather shoes. So in the Napoleonic Wars, they made shoes for only one side. One side fits both, so not a left and a right shoe. So I wish I could get a pair of those, but sadly, I'm just using literally just standard, plain, modern leather shoes. On top of it, over here, I wear gaiters. These are called gaiters. Gaiters are essentially things that go over your leg, and they give you calf support as well as you can see, keeping stones and debris out of your shoes. Pretty cool, hey? And they button up all along the edge over here. As you can see, these are, so everything here, absolutely everything is homemade. Absolutely everything. So yeah, bear with me, it's all my homemade stuff, but I did my best. I modeled these after a pair found in Borodino. There is a YouTube channel where they made a video about reenacting the French Fusilier. A lot of help I took from that video. I'll put a link to that beautiful video there. And then after that, I wear my breeches. So these are not trousers. Trousers are long and don't taper. Breeches taper. And look at how high up they go. Can you see that, hey? And you know what's funny? They're not even high enough. You see Napoleonic pants going right up over here, and then suspenders. I sadly am not suspending them. I created a tie system at the back here, because guess what? I actually use karate pants that I found at a second-hand charity shop that I requisitioned and tailored into breeches. Even my lapels are using that same karate gi material. So sorry to all those karate people out there. I did butcher that outfit, but it was worth it. Cool. Next up, so underneath I'd be wearing, as you see, just a plain shirt. There is a pattern for a late 18th century shirt, which you should follow. And over here I wear my tunic. The tunic, the tunic is very decorated. And you think, why would they wear this when fighting in war? The thing is that generally they would wear their greatcoats when campaigning to keep it covered. But yeah, no, often they would wear, if it's hot, especially in Spain, they would wear it just like this. Keeping it clean can be a bit frustrating, but it's not as bad as you think it is, because this type of warfare, you're pretty much marching and standing up and shooting. You're not running, taking cover, proning. That's for later warfare. This is a different style of warfare. So these things on the front here are called lapels. Lapels are basically purely decorative fronts to a tunic. Even Napoleon himself wore lapels with his tunic. Napoleon wore the uniform of a corporal, actually, funny enough. So yeah, some people, he was nicknamed Le Petit Corporal, the little corporal. So yeah, and it would be in the colors of the French Revolution of Paris, so red, white and blue. These things on the top here are called epaulettes, and soldiers would put their straps under the epaulettes. Here's my collar. These are basically my cuffs. Cuffs are basically just decorative, purely decorative, with 3 buttons over here at the front. And at the back, you can see piping over here. So these little edges that give something another color is called piping. There's red piping at the back. And as you can see over here is the N, the imperial N and crown for, guess who? For Norway. Yes, Viva Norway. Just kidding, Napoleon, duh. So there we go. And please don't ask, that was a nightmare to sew, but it was worth it. Great. Next up on the attire list is soldiers in the Napoleonic Wars. All of them were issued cartridge boxes like this. It's basically a leather box, a leather pouch that would house a soldier's ammunition, his paper cartridges. Here's some paper cartridges that I made just for the model, but there would be a big wooden frame with holes to put them in. I don't have that. This literally was a handbag I requisitioned, so it looks good when you don't open it. And this always goes on your left shoulder. So cartridge box always on your left soldier's shoulder, so that your right hand can reach for a cartridge. And what you do is you open your epaulette and feed the epaulette through and then close it there. You would button it. I have cheated and used Velcro, so bear with me. I've even cheated and used Velcro here. I should have used eye hooks, little eyelet hooks. So just a cheat I use because I'm awful at working with eyelets. I've never sewed them, I battle with them, so just a little cheat for now. So your cartridge box goes on the left shoulder, and then you take your other strap and put it on the right shoulder, and this strap houses your saber. I sadly don't have a saber. I'm actually using a katana holster, but it's the same shape. You would actually have a very Western saber. It's like, think of a pirate sword, and you draw it, it's like a pirate sword. That would go in the main slot here, and on a little secondary pouch here goes your bayonet. Here is the bayonet, which I will demonstrate to you now. This goes on, yep, your right shoulder. Something hugely important you need to know if you want to reenact the Napoleonic Wars, or just for interest's sake. There was a general called Baden, and he reformed the French army. So it was in 1812 that the Baden reforms took place, and the Baden reforms did some very important changes. One change was they eliminated this strap, they eliminated the saber. There was no need for sabers. Even soldiers threw their sabers away on campaign. And they moved the bayonet to be attached onto the cartridge box strap. Another huge change is the lapels on the tunic were open before. So think about Austerlitz, think about Marengo, Friedland, the early days in the wars. Napoleon soldiers had lapels that went like this. I'll put a picture up. Then Baden reformed them to be closed so that the waistcoat underneath could not be seen. So yeah, there's another few Baden reforms which I'll get to with the shako. There we go. Next on the list is the shako. So that is what this type of hat is called. It's called a shako. It comes from Hungarian. And it was essentially used first by Hungarian hussars, which are basically horsemen with sabers. And eventually, for some reason, this hat slowly started to spread. And by 1806, Napoleon officially incorporated the shako and replaced the bicorn hat. So before that, French soldiers were wearing the bicorn hat. I'll put a picture up too. And even Napoleon wore a bicorn throughout his whole career. So yeah, that's fascinating how it almost like the 1800s, with the 1800s arriving, so was the fashion changing. And 1700s pirate hats, bicorns, to the shako. And the shako is quite a cool little hat because it has a lot of meaning. So firstly is a visor to keep the sun out of your eyes. These are called chin scales, and they would be made out of brass in original shakos. Mine, I actually used an ice cream container, the plastic, that I cut, and I cut each little individual scale and I punched holes in it where you might see, and tied it up with string. And then I sewed on some fake leather on the edges. Even these straps are fake leather, sadly. But yep, anyway, and that makes it nice and comfortable. And then I sewed onto that and attached through the holes a lace to tie it up onto your chin. So this is designed to keep the shako on your chin, especially if things are getting quite rough. What is so cool is you could also fold these up. Mine is a bit stiff, bear with me. You could fold it up like this and tie it around the pom-pom. And you often see soldiers wearing the shako like this with the chin scales folded up. Bonjour, oui. Je suis un fusilier, oui. Quite nice, hey? I prefer it to be untied. I want my gear to stay on me and know that it's going to not fall off, especially if I run around or something. Going further up, this over here is called the shako plate. This denotes which regiment I'm in. La Grande Armée was divided into different subcategories to sort of give better command and control over Napoleon's army. So I might put up a little thing here to show you the exact order, and this shows which regiment I'm in. I'm in the 1st Regiment. The reason I chose the 1st Regiment is because they saw service in Spain. So that means this is an accurate shako for a soldier in the Peninsular War. On top of that is the cockade. This is a real relic of the French Revolution. This became a common sight in the French Revolution to wear the colors of Paris, blue and red, and also white for the aristocracy, which was the early days of the revolution when they thought they could collaborate with the king. The king, aristocracy, say with me. So yes, but this just became the symbol of France, the French flag. So this is called a cockade. In real life, it would be a ribbon that was folded like this. I've actually printed and laminated a cockade because I didn't have the ribbon, and I've been looking everywhere. I cannot find the right color ribbon. I might just take separate materials, sew together. Anyway, and on top over here, you're probably wondering, what is that? It looks cool, but also looks silly. But I think it looks cool. I don't know. What do you think? This is called the pom-pom. It's literally a pom-pom. Mine, again, is fake. It's actually polystyrene, not wool. It should be wool. It's a pom-pom. And what this would do is denote which company you're in. Generally, there were grenadiers, there were voltigeurs, and there were fusiliers. In the heavy infantry and in the light infantry, you get also fusiliers, but light fusiliers. You get chasseurs, and then you get light voltigeurs. So grenadiers are only in the heavy infantry. I am in the heavy infantry, as you can tell by all my uniform, my colors, my piping, and my shako. So this tells me that I am in the 2nd Fusiliers with a sky blue pom-pom. There was a pink pom-pom, a green pom-pom. I forgot the 4th one. There were always 4 Fusilier companies surrounded by 1 Grenadier company and 1 Voltigeur company to protect the flanks. But the 4 Fusiliers were the main line infantry. Line infantry basically means a soldier that forms part of the spine of the army, the backbone, the main line of troops that are in the center. That's what I am, a Fusilier. Fusilier is French for musketeer. It's named after the spiraling of the barrel, even though we use smooth bore muskets, so that's a bit weird. Anyway, one cool thing about the shako is, check it this. I often store different things in my shako things like a toothbrush, things like spare socks, maybe even the letters from my love back at home. Oui. Marie, I miss you so much. Shh, don't tell anyone, all right? Especially Jean-Claude. But you can also put something else in here. You're probably wondering, what is this now? These are called Shako cords. So Shako cords are only to be worn on parade or when you're trying to look fancy, not during battle. Although you see some paintings of soldiers with their Shako cords in battle, so it probably wasn't that as strict as you think, but they can get in the way. So how to apply the Shako cords is you would pop on the little star and hook on each side. You can also take them off, but I keep them on always, might as well, since I sometimes do apply my Shako cords. So forgive this, it's not staying. I need to sew it again behind. So how to apply the Shako cords is, you see they are in two sections like this. So what you do is the main section over here, you put over here on the left side, and then you take this section, make it go across and hook it onto the right side. Then you go to the back, take the last bit, put it around, and hook that on as well. And there we go, you've applied the Shako cords. What is their purpose? Simply decorational, just to look fancy. And as you can see, with it on, it does create a real fancy look, good for parades. But you can see why, if you are shooting, running around, it doesn't get too much in the way, but if you look around close, yeah, ooh, that's a bit annoying. Yeah. Anyway, I'll leave them on just for now, right? Next up on the list is the knapsack. So again, even the Shako cords I made, I found a tutorial how to thread them. I might link that too. Super useful, really easy actually. I did have to hunt around for the tassels, and they're not even totally accurate, and I just use my fake leather to create the little discs here, but they should actually be woven. So anyway, I might put pictures there. And the knapsack too is my completely homemade knapsack. It looks all right, doesn't it? Yeah, looks pretty nice, doesn't it? The soldier's knapsack basically houses his entire life. Before I put the knapsack on, I'll explain this. This is the greatcoat. Okay, it's actually not a real one. In my case, it's literally just a blanket, which soldiers often did put blankets there. So you could see a soldier wearing a blanket, wearing a greatcoat with a blanket in their knapsack. But generally, if they're wearing the greatcoat, you wouldn't see it on top here because they're wearing it. Duh. That's held together by two straps on top. And then you would unbuckle all this and open it, but mine is non-functional. You actually have to go to the back and open it from the back. It's not correct at all, but it's just because it's my homemade knapsack. So greatcoats are so important because every soldier, every officer, everyone had a greatcoat. It's basically your house. You live in it, you sleep in it. It's a very handy piece of gear. Since I don't have a Napoleonic greatcoat, I have something similar that can simulate it. I have a modern French gabardine greatcoat. I use this for my actual Napoleon impression. You'll see in my Stone to Steam videos. This is pretty similar to the greatcoats worn by French soldiers. Now, how to wear it? You first have to take this all off. Hey, don't I look like the emperor now, huh? Especially if I do this. Bonjour, vive la France! I am not shot! I am not shot! Huh? On the Napoleonic greatcoats, they would be double-breasted. Mine is sadly single-breasted, so not accurate. And the buttons are hidden by a flap. They were not hidden on the 19th century greatcoats. But nonetheless, you would button it all the way up, especially if it's very cold. And always the collars were up like this. I don't think you could actually put it down easily. I've even seen one greatcoat with the button-up little thingy here. So that's just the way the French did it. Then you put your straps back on because you need to fight sometimes if you're in your greatcoat. And then last but not least, the shako. And then last but not least, the musket, which I will explain soon. So here we have a soldier in full campaign regalia. However, the shako cords would not generally be worn. They would be placed back into the shako. So let me do that. There we go. There is a famous set of artwork from the Peninsular War, and it's called The Horrors of War. And in one of the pictures is a group of French soldiers in greatcoats with their sabres, so pre-Baden reform, and they are aiming and shooting at Spanish civilians or guerrillas. And in it, they are I'll try pose like it and then put the picture up here just to show how similar it is and just what a piece of history it is. Does that looks about like it, huh? Mourir! La gorilla! Which brings me to the musket now. Although one last thing, the shako plate, this is a pre-Baden reform shako plate. So let's go back to the tunic. This shako plate is a pre-Baden reform shako plate, meaning that it is in a lozenge shape. Baden reformed the shako plates to look like an eagle and made the shakos slightly smaller and totally got rid of the shako cords. So this is a pre-Baden reform shako with a post-Baden reform tunic, but a pre-Baden reform straps and post-Baden reform gaiters, because the gaiters went above the knee, Baden made them go below the knee. So that's why being in 1812 is perfect for having a mix of both types of gear. All right, musket time, and then the surprises. Oh, this video's long, eh? I present to you my homemade Charleville 1777 musket. So officially it's the model 1777 musket, but it was colloquially known as the Charleville, because in the American Revolution, a lot of these were shipped in to help the revolutionaries against the British. So yeah, this is my homemade one. I made it exactly to length. It is exactly the right size, And I used a metal pipe instead of a PVC pipe, so it's actually pretty realistic weight as well. Sadly, I'm about 1 kilogram short of the actual weight of about 4 to 5 kilograms. It's a little bit lighter than it should be, but it makes sense because I use also ice cream container just like this for the flintlock mechanism, so it's completely non-functional. And I used duct tape for the barrel bands, and also I use an ice cream container for the front band. But yeah, the Charvel musket was made just like this. Sometimes you see it a little bit forward, sometimes you see it like really far back with the long tube there, but I think it looks pretty cool here. Maybe a bit more forward too. So yeah, remember, I keep them to look quite modelly because I'm in public and I take these in public. I don't want to sand it all the way down, varnish it all the way to make it look like dark wood and put metal triggers and everything. I keep it looking pretty much like a model just because of that. But yeah, you should technically shave it down a bit more if you want to make your own. Give it much more curve and groove. And yeah, and don't forget the steep angle over here on this buttstock. So, musketry in the Napoleonic Wars. Your average musketeer could get about 2 to 3 shots a minute. A skilled musketeer could get about 4 shots a minute, maybe even 5, but that's very unheard of. So what I'm going to do is I will show you how to load and fire the flintlock Charvel, and you can even time me to see if I can get 3 shots a minute to see if I'm average. Two or 3 shots a minute, then I'll be average. If I can hit 4, that'll be amazing. I've got a little method where you can hit 4, but I've never tried it in real life. I've never fired a musket in real life, sadly, so I don't actually know what it's really like, but I made this so that you can simulate it, the loading process. Okay, so let's go. All right, so loading and firing the Charvel 1777. You've just fired. Bang. Step number 1. You take your right hand, reach in for your cartridge box, take a paper cartridge. You then bite it, tearing it open, and you use some of the gunpowder inside here to pour down into the pan. Then you close the pan with the frizzen, this little thing here. It would close in the real thing. Then you take your musket, put it down, and then pour your powder all the way down, and your ball is inside here. So you stuff the entire paper cartridge in the musket. Okay, I can't do that with this one, but you stuff it inside there like that, because the paper acts as wadding to keep the ball in place. So the gunpowder, the ball, it's all in the paper cartridge. Then you take your ramrod, which lives under the musket. With my model, I've cheated and put it in the barrel. So you would take your ramrod from below, like this, flip it, and ram it down home. Flip it and back. Then you take your musket, put it to full cock, aim, and then the order would be given to present arm, fire. Pretty nice. Now let's see if I can do it. If I can get, oh, I only have 2 model cartridges. Let me quickly make a 3rd one. I'll make a 4th one just in case, but I'm not that confident I will be able to get a 4th shot out in 1 minute. You never know. Let's see how I do. I'm just going to keep going until I'm on 4. I can't see the timer from here, so you'll let me know. Okay. Ready, steady, go. Oh, damn it. bang. Bang! 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 How long was that? Not sure. It felt like about a minute. Maybe a bit longer. Let me just pick up my litter. So that is what it's like to do musket drill. Firing the musket as fast as you could just to get those rounds at the enemy. Nothing about accuracy. Another aspect is la bayonet. So the order would be given to fix bayonets. You'd pop it down, draw your bayonet from here, or if it's barred and reformed from here, and then, oops, fix the bayonet. There we go. And now look at how long the musket is now. Crazy, hey? And then when marching with it, look at this. This is the bayonet I made for the Civil War, the US Civil War outfit. So that's actually the same bayonet as that one. As you can see in my model bayonet, which literally is a plumbing hook type of thing. Weird, I don't know what it is. With a bit of plastic here that I've stuck on. You just pull it off. Yeah. Anyway, DIY. There is one method that allows you to get about 4 shots a minute easily. It's called the spit tap method. I've never tested it. I've seen a video of musketeers, of guys who shoot muskets in modern times, and they did it. They pulled it off. So how it works is like this. Let me get another paper cartridge. So the spit tap method is different in that you fired, then what you do is, yep, the usual, but instead of biting just the tip, you have to bite the ball, bite into the ball. Now you keep the ball in your mouth, and it gets spit on the ball. You prime the pan with gunpowder, close the pan, then you pour the gunpowder down the barrel, then you spit the ball into the barrel, and then you literally tap it, and the spit creates a bit of lubrication to make the ball fall all the way down by itself. No need to ram. And then you're ready to fire. Only problem is because it's not a tight plug and there's no wadding, that if you put your musket down, it's going to fall out. But generally in battle, your musket's either facing up or horizontal. Interesting, hey? So I'll try again. So spit tap method. In fact, let's do that again, but with the spit tap method now. Okay, ready, steady, bang. Bang! Bang! Was that quicker? I'm sure it was. Right, now for the surprise, as I promised. Ah. So I also washed my hair with, guess what, with apple cider vinegar. When you are out in the field, you have no shampoo, honestly. And there's a method where you wash your hair with vinegar. I don't know if it was practiced a lot in the Napoleonic Wars, but they were issued a vinegar ration. And I heard from someone, actually it was Outdoor Videos with Brad. He suggested that you wash your hair with apple cider vinegar if you're out in the field. And I must say, yeah, my hair feels clean. It gets rid of the oil. So literally my own very self is authentic now. You're probably wondering what this is. This is gunpowder. Okay, well, it's actually black shoe oil. And soldiers often would get quite powdery with the gunpowder after all the firing, even on their face. Luckily I kept my face clean, I suppose. But just a little bit of detail if you want your reenactment to be a little bit more authentic. Hey? So the surprise I bought is here, but I thought let's first look at the food that a soldier would eat in Napoleonic times, because I'm hungry now. So what did a soldier eat? I have in this bag over here, modern bag, the modern equivalents of Napoleonic food. So you'll be able to hopefully find them at shops nearby you and do it yourself. So first on the list is hardtack. Hardtack. Best place to find it, go to the biscuit/cracker section. I found hardtack. It's literally ingredients, wheat, salt. Great, hey? It's literally just wheat biscuits. Only problem is, modern shops, they don't have real hard tack that's supposed to be hard. It's more like ship's biscuits. Soldiers in the Napoleonic times, and even before and after, check out my US Civil War video, they ate hardtack, which was cooked really hard and dry so that it's preserved. The ones at the shops are not hard enough to be hardtack, but it's the same ingredients as they had 200 years ago. Cool, eh? So look out. So look out, it has to just have wheat and salt. Okay, egg, it's a bit luxurious. Next up on the ration list, pork. So, soldiers are also issued a ration of pork or beef. Protein was important. Sometimes it was not available though, so sometimes a soldier had to do with just hardtack and whatever he could find. But in ideal circumstances, let's say it's 1812, Spain is going badly, but at least we're issued some nice rations again. It's been a while. We'd be given some pork. In this case, it's ham. It's been cooked. It's literally just cooked ham. Yeah. The quality and the type of method would vary as well. The most common would be just like the US Civil War, where you boil your meat, but you also dry the meat as well, preserve it, salt it. So salt pork, very common, even in Napoleonic times. And yeah, you could often put your hardtack crackers with your pork and I'll be marching all day, hey? And you get hungry, eh? Guess what my record is in this outfit? 12 hours. Yep, I did 12-hour march in my full Napoleonic kit, although it was before I upgraded it fully. I didn't even have lapels, sadly. But yeah, in my earlier mark Napoleonic kits, I did a 12-hour march. And it's doable. It's incredible what the human body can do, hey? So don't ever underestimate yourself, hey? Whoever's watching, my lovely future people. The people from the future, la future peuple. Next up on the list is cheese. In my case, I have feta cheese. So cheese was also part of the rations, but not a staple ration. It was sometimes issued. So in my case, I've got, feta cheese since we're in Spain. Mediterranean is a real part of the diet. There's even pepper in here. That's luxurious. And there's a source where I read that where the soldiers marched off with their gourds filled with wine and their pockets filled with biscuits. Which brings me to the next item on the list. This I plundered from the Spanish. Yeah, biscuits. There is a diary talking about the Napoleonic Wars, and in it one of the soldiers talks about having his pocket filled with biscuits. So I have shortbread biscuits here. This is something you only get after being billeted in a village and plundering that village if they hopefully cooperate, which generally, if you are in the east, is cooperates, especially in Germany, like the Confederation of the Rhine. But in Spain, I probably had to kill someone to get this. His name was Juan. He was such a good man. He had a family, a wife. I killed them all. But the biscuit is so good. That it was worth it. Merci beaucoup, Juan. Juan. Next up on the list, because I'm in Spain, I have access to dates. Nothing better than biscuits and dates for dessert, hey? Amazing. Yep, dates, a food eaten from Rome right up until, well, now in 2025. What a piece of history. If you guys ask me, dates are probably my favorite food in the whole world. Cool, so that was the food of a Napoleonic soldier. Now, what is the surprise that I brought? To end off the video, the long video now. Oh gosh, I hope it's been entertaining enough. I've brought a diary of a Napoleonic soldier. Back in 2021, when I first started really revamping my Napoleonic outfits, after 2020 it was very rough, I came across Jacob Walter's work. Jacob Walter was a German soldier fighting in La Grande Armée for Napoleon, conscripted without any will, but nonetheless he was optimistic enough. And I sadly don't have the whole diary, but I have a bit of an extract right over here. And a really cool source from, it's a website, let me see, it's called historyquester.com. I'm going to read to you the extract from Historyquester. And just listen and enjoy. Lice, death, and soapy peas. The diary of a Napoleonic foot soldier is a unique, albeit gruesome account of Napoleon's conquests. It's told from the perspective of a peasant, Jacob Walter, which is a rare occurrence. All other accounts of these wars are from the more well-to-do. Walter was also ahead of his time in giving an even-handed recounting of the war's events. Though we applaud telling both sides of an issue nowadays, in the late 18th or early 19th century, it was much more common to write only in favor of one side. Walter's diary is also just an honest account of a man's life during bleak times. It's not an authoritative text on the tactics of war, dates of battles, and characters of leaders. Instead, Walter tells it like it is. War that is hungry, savage on both sides, and either freezing cold or blisteringly hot. While reading, I found myself squirming a lot. Walter describes the rampant infestation of lice the army dealt with. At one point, his captain asks him to help him, as his lice is really bothering him. Now, ladies and gentlemen, right over here is an actual extract from the diary itself, so listen to this. For this reason, he asked me to kill the tormentors on his shirt collar. I did it, but when I had his collar open, his raw flesh showed forth where the greedy beasts had gnawed in. I had to turn my eyes away with abhorrence and reassure the master that I saw nothing, telling him that my eyes hurt so much from the smoke that I could not see anything. These pests, however, were no less to be found on me, thousands of them. Yeah, crazy, hey? And we read on with the extract. Walter does a really good job of depicting the desensitization that was required of soldiers just in order to survive the horrors that they were experiencing. He sees thousands killed and wounded, but there's no way to save the wounded, so they are left to die as well. One night, while trying to find a place to sleep in the dark, Walter curls up next to his horse on a bit of ground that is softer than its surroundings. In the morning, he discovers he slept atop a dead man's belly that hadn't frozen solid yet. And then he moves on. Remember, Jacob Walter fought in Russia, so this is his account of being in Russia and that crazy retreat. He also talks of his desperate search for food when traveling through frozen Russia. He and his comrades would head towards burning villages to scavenge any hidden food stores. I couldn't help but think of the hungry peasants the soldiers left behind when they were victorious. Walter and some of his comrades combined some of their meager food supplies for a memorable meal. A rare pot of seasoned peas with lard. They were forced to throw away though, because the frozen lard was actually soap. Crazy, hey? Imagine that feeling when you're starving and you have to throw away food. Because yeah, you actually don't want to eat soap, hey? That's going to do you more damage than eating the peas. Yeah, crazy, hey? And last but not least, 1812 to 1814 sent 650,000 men into Russia. 200,000 were captured and only 30,000 returned. Oh, I said 40,000. 30,000 returned. Miraculously, Walter was one of those who returned to his family. Walter gives all the credit for his survival to God. He notes that since I did not suffer the misfortune of being wounded, I thought, God... Oh wait, sorry, I must read it in his accent, the German accent. Since I did not suffer the misfortune of being wounded, I thought, God, thou hast allowed me to live till now. I thank thee and offer up my sufferings to thee, and pray thee to the same time to take me further into thy protection. With all the horrific misadventures Walter endured, it's hard to believe his survival was anything but supernatural. HistoryQuester.com, all credit goes to them. I read an account also of Jacob Walter saying how in Russia they were so frozen that they would take dead soldiers and use them as human cushions. And think about it. If you were there and you were literally freezing to death, what would you do? That's literally the best option. Just like Napoleon had no choice but to retreat or die, so did those soldiers have no choice but to sit on their dead comrades or die. And imagine if it's someone you know, hey? Anyway, yeah, it's crazy. But when he headed off to Russia, he accounted of how their gourds were filled with wine and their biscuits with pockets. And you're probably wondering, there was no canteen on me. It's true, they were not issued canteens in La Grande Armée. So they probably would have had gourds or other canteens they acquired and kept them in their knapsacks, I guess. I would have probably done that. Future, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned a thing or two about the Napoleonic Wars. Literally the biggest war set of wars. It's technically wars, but if you could be counted as one war. The war against Bonaparte was literally the biggest war in all of human history up until that point. Just as the invasion of Russia, that army broke the army record in history. Only in World War One would that be taken over, and only did the 30 Years' War technically outweigh the Napoleonic Wars in terms of deaths. So yeah, it's debatable, but Napoleonic Wars and 30 Years' War, biggest wars in human history. That was just a small overview. That was just an overview with the uniforms, what they ate, and what they thought. No better way to relive the past than to eat what they did and to read their words. So thank you for joining me as I did so, and I look forward to the next one, future. Au revoir.